To the first of the videos related to our project management class, and each of the videos will deal with a project management software tool. Now for this class we have selected an open source software application called Project Libre. Open source generally means that it doesn't cost anything to use the tool. The other thing that's good about this tool is that it can be run on basically all three of the major operating system platforms: Windows, the Apple Mac, and also Linux or Linux, depending on how you term the operating system. And this tool will run on those three platforms. And indeed, in this course, for the videos that are being recorded, it was done on an Apple Mac. So it works on an Apple as well as on Windows and Linux. You can download this. There is a link for it in the course room. I don't go through the installation of the tool because there are the three different platforms: Windows, the Apple Mac, and also Linux. And so if you're using the tool, you may need to look at some videos on installing Project Libre on either of those three operating systems if you run into problems. For the week one, there's no project or written assignment related to using this tool. In subsequent weeks, for the first couple of weeks of or workshops of this course, you will be using this tool to create a sample project that you can create on your own, and you'll be submitting that as part of your assignments. We will not be using the tool, though, in the final project unless for some reason you decided you want to. The final project doesn't really use the tool. We'll be doing something else in the final project for this course. What I want to do this week, and you don't have to have this loaded yet, it's not a bad idea to install it in week one so you're ready for week two. What I'm doing is just giving you an overview of what the tool looks like. So once you have it up and running and you started, this is what you should see. Now, I will say that right up here at the very, very top, it says Belhaven IT612. That won't be there. I created a project called Belhaven IT612 for the course. And in this particular case, I've got it already set up, so don't worry about that. You should see something different there, but everything else will be pretty much the same. Now it will the view that you have at the moment will be a little different based on the operating system platform you're running it on. So if you're running it on a Windows machine or a Linux machine, it should look maybe a little different than this, although I'll be honest with you, because it's an open source tool, the front end of this is pretty much the same. I've actually seen it on Windows in the past, and I've never really noticed that much of a difference. And Linux is a lot like the Apple Mac operating system from that standpoint, and so this will pretty much run, and what you're seeing is pretty much what you get. Notice that there are 4 menu items across the top. We'll start with the very first one, File. So there are 4 menu items: File, Task, Resource, and View. Going back to File, you'll notice that some of the submenus are similar to what you see in almost any tool you use. How it gets displayed to you may be a little different, but you typically always have a file open, a file new, a button to save, and so on. You'll notice in the second submenu, This all has to do with printing, so you can print to a printer. You can have a preview of it before you print it. You can also save your project into a PDF. And then the last one is unique to project management tools or software, in that the different items that are in this particular submenu are specific to project management. So, and I'll just name a couple of them here. As an example, baseline. What does that mean? Well, when you're developing a project in software like this, you would usually develop a plan first before you ever started working on the project. You'll create tasks that represent the work that needs to be done in a project. And at some point you want to save it as the plan. As the plan. The reason is that you want to have usually you want to have an original of what the project should have looked like when everybody signed on and it started. And then you can look at the difference between the original baseline of the project plan versus any scope changes, which we'll talk about in a subsequent week. And also as you start to track it to see if it matches up with what you thought your plan should look like. Sometimes tasks change. A good example, working on a project many years ago had to do with optics, and somebody made a mistake and got some wiring turned around, and when they fired up one of the devices that made the system work, one of the lasers burned out. Unfortunately, they had to order a new laser, and it was a custom laser device. So it took some extra time. Well, that's going to affect the plan. And so what they did was, instead of creating a second task for laser, they extended the first one. And of course, now the plan's changed. So the baseline saves it the way it was, and now we have a plan that shows us what the difference is. Calendar, on the other hand, has to do with the default workday versus specialized workdays. So the default in project tools generally is Monday through Friday, 8 to 5, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. Often that will have a built-in lunch hour for an hour, so an 8-hour day. In addition, you may have overtime, which you may end up, or let me put it this way, overtime can be, the basic calendar can handle overtime. But let's say that you have a unique situation, and I know some companies that do this, where employees work 5 days one week and 4 days the next, often called 980s. So they work 9-hour days for 9 days, and then the 10th day, every other week, they have it off. So they get every other Friday off or every other Monday off. Also, you could have days where you could have a situation where people work an unusual calendar, where because the kind of work that they do might be a second shift, or they might actually be doing a 10-hour day on a regular basis. Now that would be a little unusual, but still it is possible. Okay. The next item, task. These particular menu, submenu items are kind of unique, although you will note that one of the submenu items is called clipboard. That's pretty standard. Copy, cut, paste, and you can move, you can copy tasks and you can paste them into someplace else, and so on and so forth. The first has to do with views, how you view your project as you're putting it together. And each of those is a unique view of your project. Now, right now we're looking at the default view, which is the Gantt chart. That's why you're seeing what you're seeing right now, okay? Also off to the right then, there is the last submenu item called task. few of those look similar. You've got insert, delete, indent, outdent, and then everything else is a little unique. Obviously, some of those we already saw, calendar, baseline, but then, and then find is pretty standard. You can typically search any software package. You can do the same here. You can search for tasks, and some projects can be thousands of tasks long. So it's very helpful to have that. But notice these assign resources and the notes and link and unlink. We'll be using some of these in subsequent videos. The next menu item, again, the clipboard is quite common. You can copy and paste items and move them around. The resource submenu, same items that were in task, but here, this particular menu item has to do with people assigned to tasks called resources. And by the way, it isn't just people. You could assign a vehicle, or you could assign a tool. Like, let's say this particular project is a prototype, manufacturing prototype. So you might have some CNC lathes or special tools that are expensive, and you're going to assign them to this project. Resources are any, it could be a person, could be a task, could be anything that that has value that you want to track. Then the last item has to do with how you view tasks, resources, some generic reports, some subview reports, that kind of thing. So right now, again, we're looking at the Gantt chart, but we could change that to network. And by the way, notice as soon as I do it, nothing there. Well, that's because we haven't added anything in here. And although we aren't going to really get into it this week in this video, I will show you briefly what goes on here, because down below the menu items that we've been looking at are a couple of columns of information and then what looks like a calendar. Okay, so let me pull off the columns so we see all the columns that are there by default, and by default there are 7 of them. The main one that we care about is the one called name, or it could appropriately be called task. And in this particular case, we are, that's where we put in a specific task. And I'm going to show you one in just a second, just so you get a feel for it. Duration has to do with the length of a task. By default, these software packages usually are broken down by minutes, hours, days, weeks, and months. So the duration, and we'll get into this in a later video, but there are some defaults for duration. The start and finish are the date and time that a task began and when a task ends. And in just a moment, you'll see what we're talking about. Predecessor has to do with, are there any tasks that take place prior to a given task? Let's say it's the third or fourth task down. And the third or fourth task down can't begin till task 1 and 2 are done. Those are called predecessors, and predecessors are very important in projects because some tasks cannot begin until others are completed. And then the last one, resource names. As you add resources, people or equipment or something that you add in. And a good example, let's say that you have a group of people working in a remote location, and you have to feed them every day lunch, and you deliver lunch to the site. Now that may be something, because of the cost, that needs to be tracked, and that would be a resource. So you could say, we've got 5 resources, they're going to be remote, we're going to have to deliver lunch to them, and that's going to cost us $500 a day, and we want to track that. Sounds like a pretty good lunch to me, huh? And then, so anyway, that's where you'll see the resources stacked up as you start to add them. Now let's look at then, and I'm going to pull this back to the left again, right to about here. You would expect then to see something to the right where the dates are. And the answer is yes. Now, this task, or this project that I created was set up on Monday, October 12th. So when I put in the first task, it's actually going to start on the beginning date. So let me type in a task. I'll just give it a real simple name, Task 1. Now to make it easy to see, by default you'll note it's 1 day long, but let's make it 1 week long. Oops, doesn't like that, did it? I typed it wrong. Actually, it's easier to type it this way. 1W. And here we go. 1W, or 1 week, is equivalent of 5 days. Notice it started on the 12th, ends on Friday the 16th at 5 p.m., so there's a default calendar going on here. Now see what happened to the right, and you'll see there's a task bar that got added. That bar indicates the task and how long that task is going to take, and it shows up on our calendar. Of interest, by the way, just to whet your appetite, let's say this is 2 weeks long. It's now 10 days, and notice that it spanned a weekend. Okay, now the weekend, notice it's grayed out. If you look at October 11, at the end of the week, that's S for Saturday. October 18th, the start of a new week, that S is for Sunday, but those are non-working days. So notice that the project spans the 2 weeks, and it spans the full 2 weeks, because the default is, in this particular case, a 5-day work week. There you go. I can save this by, at this point, just hitting Save As or Save, and it will save the project. For right now, I will just leave it blank, because we're going to use this in its entirety to expand our knowledge of the use of Project Libre going forward. So let me suggest that you download this as soon as possible, so that you are prepared, and you could even follow along with the videos in the future. In future weeks, there'll be some assignments, written assignments, which you will add to a project that you will be building on your own based on what we're going over in the video. And my suggestion is to get Libre for your Project Libre for your machine, whether it be Windows, whether it be Apple Mac, or it be Linux. And I might add for Windows, Windows 10, or usually prior versions. This should work with Windows 8 or Windows 10. I'm running the latest version on this machine, which is a Apple Mac, Catalina. And so it is one of the latest versions of the Apple OS for the desktop, and it should work for a Mac, MacBook Pro, or for a desktop. And then Linux, that should be no problem at all. So here you go. We've got a basic start, a look at the tool, so you're not blindsided when we begin using it in our first video in Workshop 2.